So when it comes to the 2023 All-Ireland Senior Football Championship and National Football League, there'll be one team that will look back at this season with a huge amount of regret, and that is Galway. You see, if the All-Ireland Football Championship had been a league table, Galway would have been leading for large parts. They were the early front runners. They were many people's picks to actually win the All-Ireland at different moments in time. They were probably the most consistent team before their defeat to Armagh in the final day of the group stages. They'd been getting their way through games. It hadn't always been pretty. It hadn't always been the most enjoyable watching Galway, but they were grinding their way through a lot of big games, like they did against Roscommon in the Connacht semi-finals, like they did against both Tyrone and Westmeath in the group stages as well. And Galway they were ticking along quite nicely. You looked at Galway and you thought they have a very young team, very young side. Pádraig Joyce has obviously been there for a couple of seasons. There's been a transition of players in the last couple of years. He's changed it up a little bit. But you looked at Galway and you thought from 1 to 15, they are very, very strong. Conor Gleeson's come on leaps and bounds since becoming the main man between the sticks for Galway. His kickouts are fantastic. He certainly has a lot to work on still to be up there with the top goalkeepers in the game, but I thought he was very good. Jack Lynn at cornerback has really established himself as one of the best young cornerbacks in the game at the moment, and obviously we remember him from the Galway under-20s that won the All-Ireland a couple of seasons ago as well. Sean Kelly's looked outstanding at different moments as well for Galway. He's a real sort of modern-day wing-back, you could say, modern-day defender, where he'll offer you a lot on defence, but he'll also offer you a lot in attack in terms of running up the field with the ball, contributing to scores, getting a couple of scores and big goals in different moments himself. And the midfield discussion for Galway, like their midfield is outstanding with Paul Conroy, Killian McDade. You've got Peter Cook, who sometimes operates in around the half-forward line, but he can drop back into midfield as well. A really physical presence in around the middle, and a player like Paul Conroy, who's outstanding not only with his physicality around the middle of the park, but also in terms of scoring as well. And Galway, you just looked at it and thought, they look like everything is going right. Matthew Tierney was outstanding. You remember at one stage in the league, in the early parts of the championship, he was getting shouts for potential footballer of the year. He was in flying form. Damian Comer was doing his thing as well. Shane Walsh hadn't quite clicked into gear just yet, but you were looking at it and thinking, with a player of his quality, a player of his standards, he'll eventually click into gear at some point. But that didn't happen. You know, Walsh probably didn't have the season that we'd expected from a Galway perspective, and almost with a blink of an eye, Galway went from front runners for the All-Ireland to knocked out in preliminary quarter-final by Mayo, and you'll remember that defeat to Armagh as well. And it's kind of mad thinking back with Galway, because it all happened so quickly, didn't it? In the space of 2 weeks, they went from, you know, losing to Armagh, then losing to Mayo as well. It all happened in the space of a week, and you were looking at it and thinking, where did it go wrong for Galway? Like, how were they everyone's front runners for the All-Ireland? And I don't say everyone's front runners, but I remember Off the Ball had them top of their football power rankings. There was a lot of people saying that they were the most consistent team in the country, because if you remember back to the group stages, Dublin had looked very inconsistent. They, you know, struggled to get over the line. They didn't even get over the line against Roscommon. They looked very, very poor that day. You remember some of the performances in the Leinster Championship against the likes of Kildare. In the league, they'd been far from convincing as well. Kerry had certainly had their ups and downs. I mean, they lost to Mayo in the group stages. Didn't look particularly brilliant against Cork either. And you're looking at a lot of teams around the country. Tyrone had looked inconsistent. Mayo themselves had struggled at different parts in the group stages, and obviously lost to Roscommon earlier in the year as well. So Galway were looking like the most consistent team, you would say, in terms of the fact that they were able to look as good as they did in the league, get to a league final, and then in the group stages they were coasting right up until that Armagh game. And I think for Galway, ultimately, when Pádraig Joyce looks back at this season, when Galway look back at this season, I think, look, Galway do have a very young side, and I think people forget that. The amount of players who were a part of that under-20 team from a couple of seasons ago that won the All-Ireland, the likes of Jack McGlynn, Sean Fitzgerald, Sean Kelly, Cian Hernan, John Marr, Killian McDade. Not all those were a part of that under-20 side a couple of years ago, but a lot of very, very young players in that team, and I think people are forgetting that. You've got the likes of Tom O'Callaghan coming off the bench, Cathal Sweeney coming on as well. It is a very young side, and I think for Galway, it goes back to what I said about Mayo a couple of days ago. Like, Mayo this season only had one way of playing, and I think in order to win All-Irelands, in order to be up there being one of the best teams in the country and everything else, you need balance between defence and attack, and you need to be able to mix it up. Galway did show that at different moments this season. I thought they balanced it quite well, but I think they did retract and they did look overly cautious at times. I don't think they put there was times this season when they came, against Mayo, for example, in that first half, Mayo were there for the taking. I remember Galway were playing with the breeze in the first half. Mayo were there for the taking, and Galway should have, pounced on them. They should have went after them, and that was the thing about I look at Galway at times this season. There was moments this year, even in that game versus Tyrone, where they beat them, but if you remember, Tyrone were down to 14 men and Galway sort of limped over the line in the end. Galway have had the moments this season to really put a team away, to get after a team, to press up on kickouts and really do damage in attack. And they've just lacked that fluidity, I think, in their attack. And, Shane Walsh obviously had a very long year in terms of, if you go back to last season, he was critical in Galway getting to the All-Ireland final. Eventually, obviously, losing to Kerry, but it was nothing down to him. His performance in the final was sensational. And then, obviously, with Kilmacud Crokes, he played a key part in the Dublin club's rise to the Dublin Club Football Championship, the Leinster Club Football Championship, and the All-Ireland. And certainly for him, he didn't get a break really at all, did he? He got a small break through the early stages of the league and then came back, but was it enough of a break? I'm not entirely sure. And you could certainly see in his performances, he was far from his absolute best. And I think for Galway, when they don't have Damian Comer, they just look a completely different team. And I think it's looked that way for a couple of seasons. You go back through the last couple of years and you look at when Damian Comer hasn't been fit and hasn't been available. Galway have struggled. They have struggled. And you remember he came off at half-time against Mayo. Galway just didn't have that same attack and threat in the second half. And, it's just what Damian Comer gives you, because not only is he the man to score big goals and big moments and, win a huge amount of points, but he's such a physical presence in there. He's a bit like an Aidan O'Shea in terms of, he really does draw the opposition's best defender. It gives the opposition something to think about. Not only is he doing what I said he was doing, but he's also tracking back, winning turnovers, setting up scores around him. He's doing so much for that Galway side, and the leadership element of it you can't neglect also as well. So I think for Galway, it was just in brief moments that they let themselves down this season, but I think both Armagh and Mayo were there for the taking in either one of those two matches. It would have been very interesting to see, had Galway come through Mayo, how would have they fared against Dublin? Would they have been beaten as comfortably as Mayo were? I don't know, and who knows? Galway would have set up a completely different way to Mayo. Galway probably would have got a lot of men behind the ball, and they would have really frustrated Dublin, and I think it would have been, a 2-3 point game, and I don't think it would have been inconceivable that Galway could have won that game, especially with the form that Dublin were coming in. So it's very interesting, all right, looking back at Galway's season. I think ultimately they do have a very young side. I think they're certainly not going anywhere anytime soon. Pádraig Joyce has proven that he is the man to lead this Galway side to a final. I think he is the right man to continue with Galway. If they can just sort of get over the line a bit more in big matches, and I think next season, when they have those moments against the likes of your Mayos and different teams, they need to put the foot on the gas, because for me this season they were far too conservative. I think Galway and Armagh probably had very similar seasons this year in the way that last year they were both full attacking. They were, crazy to watch. Two very, very attacking teams, neck and neck. Hence why when Galway and Armagh played each other, we had one of the games of the decade when they played each other last season. This year, both of them have retracted hugely, and I think because their defences struggled so much last year, there's been a huge emphasis this year on consolidation and trying to keep out the opposition. And don't get me wrong, Galway were still good on the counter-attack, and they still had certainly a lot of bright moments on the attack, but I think there was too much emphasis placed on trying to stop the opposition rather than focus on their strengths. And I think from a Galway perspective, that's something they really do need to work on next season, because the good thing for Galway is that, I don't think they're really going to lose any players going into next season. I think Damian Comer will still be there, but the rest of the players are still all very much at the right age profile. Maybe Paul Conroy could be coming slowly towards the end of his time, but, the likes of Sean Kelly, Jack Glynn, Conor Gleeson, Peter Cook, Killian McDade, Matthew Tierney, Cathal Sweeney, Tom O'Clahan, Shane Walsh as well, to be fair. They're all still at the right age profile and they're not going anywhere. And that's why Galway Galway do pose a serious threat over the next couple of seasons. They're certainly not going anywhere. I think they're going to be thereabouts next year. You know, I think Dublin and Kerry are the two front runners. I think Derry, as I've said in previous videos, I think are number 3. But I think if I had to pick, you know, a side outside of them 3 who could be the closest, I think it could be Galway. An interesting factor, like, I was thinking about this the other day. Who had the better season, Galway or Mayo? You'd probably say Mayo, because Mayo won the league and beat Galway twice. You know, in the 3 games between Mayo and Galway this year, Mayo won 2 and drew the other. So you probably would say Mayo had the better season. But I think Galway are going into next season in a better place than Mayo. And that's mainly because of where Mayo have been in the last couple of years, as opposed to where Galway have been. So, look, it's an interesting, you know, it's going to be interesting looking at Galway next season. How are they going to fare next year? I think they have a lot of good parts to their team. I think their underage is quite good. And I think they're going to be thereabouts over the next couple of seasons. Will they have what it takes to absolutely go and do it? I don't know. But let's wait and see. Anyway, leave a like, subscribe. My name's Aaron. Chat to you all soon.